Welcome to the Piece of Me podcast, the place to find different ways to bring enjoyment, simplicity, happiness, and of course, more peace into your life. Life gets busy, noisy, and at times it's messy. I'm here to help you clean things up and put peace back in its place. Each episode, I'll share tips, ideas, and fresh perspectives to help you live your best life. Hi friends, it's Lexi Lee. If you're new here, welcome. If you're not new, then welcome back. I'm so glad you'll be joining me for today's episode, which is all about one mom's story to quit her six-figure executive job and take a midlife gap year. Now, she calls it midlife because she is 42. When I read her story, I immediately knew I wanted her on the podcast. And you've heard me talk about living your best life and all the ways to do it. But this, guys, wow. And I'm not the only one who is impressed with her story. Other media outlets like Inside Edition and Good Morning America, to name a few, have already interviewed her too. Now, we spent about 30 minutes chatting about her gap year, what her plans are, and how she was able to make this all happen. So sit back and enjoy the conversation. My guest today, she's likable, relatable, and she quickly went viral for a personal decision that she made. Now, you may have already seen her videos on TikTok or even watched her story on Good Morning America. Today, Kym Wootton joins the Piece of Me podcast to share her story. Kym, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Lexi, thank you so much for having me. I really enjoy your show, and I am very excited to be a guest today.
Absolutely. We're excited that you're here. And I'm really excited to just have everyone hear your story because I think so many people will find your decision brave, a little bit risky, but also very inspirational. So before we dive in, can you just tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Of course, I am 42. I live near Boulder, Colorado. I have been married to my wonderful husband, Mike, for 21 years, and we have two incredible teenage boys, Finn and Will.
Awesome. Awesome. Now, recently you made a very big decision. So can you please tell us a little bit more about that?
Yes. At the end of January of this year, 2023, I quit my job to take a midlife gap year. Up until I quit, I was a very successful executive in the C-suite of a consulting and data science company. I worked there for 13 years. And it was on paper really a dream position. I'd worked my way up over the years. I was the only female on the executive team. I was running three very successful departments. I was responsible for the integration of the companies that we were buying. I was making a really nice six-figure salary. But I realized that I had found myself on a career path that had been driven by the need of the company and not at all what I knew that I was meant to do. So a couple of years ago, I made a plan to take what I call my midlife gap year. I wanted to give myself the opportunity to discover what I'm meant to do. And, when I was inspired by this because when kids graduate from college, sometimes they take that gap year to travel or rest or have fun before they start college and go down the path of their career. And that's what I wanted for myself, a full reset in the middle of my career. So my midlife gap year started at the end of January, and I'm having the time of my life.
That is so awesome. And you were in your position for 13 years. I didn't realize that.
I was at the company for 13 years. I was on the executive team for about the last 5.
Wow. Wow. So then what made you decide that 2023 was going to be the gap year for you?
Well, I started cooking up this plan in late 2020, and obviously, the financial piece was a big part of it being successful. And my husband and I needed a couple of full years to be able to get into a financial position to afford me to take an entire year off. So we set the goal of me giving my notice at the end of 2022, and we were able to achieve that.
That is awesome, really. Now, you've also, with your story, it's quickly gone viral. I mean, there's a lot of online blogs that have been published. Obviously, Good Morning America did an interview with you. I mean, were you expecting any of this after here you are taking your gap year?
Most definitely not. I was not expecting it at all. It's been pretty wild. And it started because I have a TikTok. I have not published that many videos. It's just a fun thing. My older son actually was the one that was saying, you should document your midlife gap year for yourself and for anyone else. Maybe you'll inspire somebody. And so I published a TikTok video on the first day of my unemployment, which was January 25th, and talked about my midlife gap year and what I wanted to do with it. And it caught the interest of a journalist in the UK who asked for us to do an interview. And we talked, and it was a great interview. What I didn't realize at the time is that she was a freelance journalist and she sold the story to a UK tabloid who ended up publishing some pretty lame headlines about my story. The actual article was good, but the headlines had spun the story that I was taking a year off from my family, that I was leaving my family for the year to travel and do whatever I wanted, that I was not selfish for doing this, and that I was going to go off and do boozy weekends with my friends while I left my family at home. And that was a real bummer. I wasn't expecting that. That obviously wasn't the heart of the story that I told her. But apparently that's how it works. So that a media outlet can buy a story and they can do whatever they want with the headlines, but they can't really adjust the story. And so after that happened, a couple of days after that published, I was pretty disappointed. I was excited to tell my story, and a lot of the comments that were being posted, and after the Mirror published it, a few other UK tabloid type media outlets published it, the comments were pretty hateful because a lot of people were reading the headlines and not reading the stories, or reading the headlines and letting that somehow maybe interpret the way that they were reading the story. And so I got a lot of comments about how selfish I am, what a terrible mom is what they were calling me, of course, in the UK. Terrible mom that I am, and that was lame, because I will say, if there's one thing that I'm good at, I'm a dang good mom. And so that was really upsetting for me to have that be how my story was coming out. But then thankfully, some US media outlets started publishing stories. And by the way, I wasn't a part of any of these republishings. This is another thing that took me by surprise, is that when these media outlets see these stories, they can just take the story and they can rewrite it in a different way and have not be involved in that storytelling at all. Even when they're writing things in first person with using I, as if I was being interviewed, which is, again, just really surprising. But thankfully, when Scary Mommy picked it up in the US, they took a different spin of it. They really said more along the lines of that I was taking a gap year so that I could rediscover who I was as a woman, and so that I could be a better mom to my kids. And so thankfully, the story kind of started to shift a little bit, and I was asked to be interviewed by another outlet called Board Panda. And again, they really spun the story in a much more true and authentic way of what I'm trying to do with this year. And then Good Morning America reached out to me, which was such a huge surprise. And we did the interview. I was really nervous about how it was going to come across. They had told me that it was going to be me and a career coach that were both going to be in this segment. And I really just didn't know what to expect. I recorded probably 45 minutes of content, and probably 35 seconds ended up on air. And you never know which 35 seconds are they going to choose to represent your story. But thankfully, it was a great story. And then, because they were publishing links to my TikTok, I started getting a flood of comments and followers and DMs, and it was such overwhelmingly positive feedback. It was super neat to hear all of these, mostly women, reach out to me and tell me how much my story was inspiring them, and telling them, gosh, I need a gap year, or maybe a gap few months. I need a break. It really is crazy that we work for 45 to 50 years once we graduate from college, and that's it. And we get a week off here or there with vacation, but that we're just expected to stay on this track forever, even if maybe that track isn't serving us. The other thing that was cool is people who would say, oh, I'm taking a gap year. I didn't realize that's what I was doing. So that's been fun too, to kind of put a name to something that people were already doing.
Now that is awesome. And now my first thought is, does your family think you're a celebrity now? I mean, are you getting special status at home or what?
Here's what we're talking about at home is that they are teasing me relentlessly about my boozy weekends. And so I actually I went and did a little getaway with my best friend a couple weeks back, and they just kept saying, enjoy your boozy weekend, Mom. And it's a joke, because we all know in my family, I don't drink. And so I'm mostly just getting teased, but my older son is now pushing me more than ever. Now you really have to continue to tell your story on social media because people are invested now. So, keep telling your story. So that's been pretty fun.
Absolutely. And it also just goes to show that you can't believe everything you read or see
Right.
online because it's not always true. And you're a perfect example of that. I mean, it's terrible that, these outlets did take your story, transform it so that it maybe benefited them. Because I'll say, I mean, I saw your story in a lot of different places and the titles were all different. So,
Yes.
to your point, I know exactly what you're talking about. Now, I'm also curious too, as you were mentioning, wanting to take this gap year. I thought about COVID and I thought about the pandemic and how a lot of people during that time, we all had to quarantine, stay home. A lot of us had to work remotely. And, we didn't have the luxury of some of the other things of going out to eat or traveling or whatnot. So, did COVID at all or the pandemic just kind of play a role in this thought process for you that might have, because some people did feel that with the pandemic that it made them evaluate, kind of how they spend their time or what's important to them. Did that at all play a role for you in your decision?
Weirdly enough, I couldn't have done this without COVID. That was definitely the silver lining of the pandemic for me is when COVID hit, we just didn't realize how much money that we were spending that we truly didn't need to spend. We discovered how much less that we could live on. And so while this seed of an idea of how could I take some time off to rediscover something new for me to do, I mean, unfortunately, I had to think tactically. How could I financially do it? And, we weren't going out to eat, we weren't going on vacations, we weren't just sort of mindlessly spending our money. And it showed us, oh, we can actually live on much less. I think once you start making a certain amount of money, you just get used to making that money and you start spending it in a certain way. But I'm not sure you're always spending it, really just I'm not sure you always think about it as much as you should. And so not only did it, I mean, and I didn't talk about this, but obviously COVID for many people, it helped us shift what is most important. And for me, of course, what was most important was my family and my kids. And I knew that I was working at a pace and in a way that I wasn't being present for them as much as I should. And even during COVID, I mean, we were all home, all four of us. My husband and I we were both, both kind of like business or office workers. And so we were at home. My kids were at home from school. And I was working actually harder than ever during the pandemic because I had no boundaries. I was starting work earlier. I was working later into the night. And so even though I was physically present with my family more than I ever had before, I was less mentally present than ever. And a few months in, man, I had a moment of clarity where I was like, what the heck am I doing? I'm putting all of
Hmm.
my energy into not the most important things.
No, absolutely. And I think, COVID did help provide that kind of clarity, like you said, of just, am I spending my time the way I want to? Am I spending my time, in the right career? I mean, we saw a lot of people shift or try new things or just get really creative with their careers or, kind of how they shifted things. So yeah, I can relate. I mean, I think a lot of people listening to this right now are probably thinking, I've had these exact same feelings or these same thoughts. So let's get a little bit more into your gap year. I mean, at this
Sure.
point, it's April. And by the time, when our listeners are going to hear this, it's going to be about mid-April. And you said that you did decide to take your gap year at the end of January of 2023. So that's just been a few months ago.
Yes.
So at this point right now, let's just start with what things are you hoping to do in your gap year?
I have so many things I want to do for this year. My main goal is to give myself space to allow what I'm really passionate about to take shape into a new career. I really, really don't want to go back to what I was doing before at the end of this year. And since I was a kid, I wanted to be a published author. Writing and communication has always come really natural to me, but for some reason, I just never thought a career in writing was available to me. And I've had an idea for a fiction novel for nearly 10 years, and this is the year that I'm going to bring it to life. I had a bunch of years, where I would say, okay, just start small, just write 10 minutes a day, just right on the weekends. And I could never find the discipline. I had so little discretionary time between as hard as I was working and devoting time to my family that when I would have pockets of time, I just didn't want to be creative. I couldn't be creative. I couldn't get it out. So now that I have the time and space, that's a huge goal for me. I also need a hard reset on my pace and my focus. One of the ways that I was able to be so successful in my career is that honestly, I was kind of obsessed with being awesome at it. I
Mm-hmm.
thought about it all the time. I worked on the weekends. I was the really lame executive emailing at 10 p.m. at night. I would wake up in the middle of the night trying to work through a problem that I was having. And this year is going to give me the opportunity to refocus my attention on my family and on myself. And
Mm-hmm.
honestly, I'm just looking forward to enjoying a slower pace of life. I was always trying to jam so much into each day. I was hyper focused on productivity and insane multitasking. So this year is going to give me the opportunity to slow down and learn the fine art of monotasking, which is very challenging for me.
I love that idea. And I also love, you bring up such a good point because I think, when the pandemic did happen, we were forced to slow down and we were forced to, reevaluate our whole life in so many different ways. But then it almost seems like now that we've come out of the pandemic that it just seems like we've kind of went right back to that speed again. I think a lot of
Hmm.
people kind of know like it almost feels like it was a while ago that it happened and we're back to doing all the things and, having all the obligations and just, going again at 100 miles an hour. So it almost feels like, that slower pace it's kind of gone again. We're right back to where we were. So I think a lot of people can relate to what you're saying and wanting to just slow down and just enjoy the moments and take it all in and just be able to breathe, have a little bit of balance in life. That's really important. So,
Absolutely. You nailed
yeah.
it. I think that unfortunately for me and a lot of other office type workers who just started working from home, we did not slow down. I know so many people, we were working harder than ever, longer than ever. And then when we came out of the pandemic, we added back all of the other responsibilities and kids' sports and social obligations. Plus, we never reset the bar. So I think you're totally on that.
Mhm. Absolutely. Now, with your gap year, I mean, you obviously said it's going to be a year, but is it possible that it might go longer than a year or maybe shorter than a year?
Yeah, that's a good question. Lexi, I believe in dreaming big. And my dream is that this year I will write a book. I will get an agent and a publisher will buy my book. And when that happens, I will officially pivot into my new career of being an author. But realistically, it can take a couple of years to get a book on the shelf. And so, even if I am able to achieve selling my book, it's really unlikely that I'll be able to officially have that be the thing that is financially supporting us going forward into 2024 and beyond. So, if I do need to go back to working early next year, I want to be able to make money using my writing skills while I continue to work towards my dream of being a novelist.
Hmm. And obviously, I think as people are listening to you, you're likable and you're just like this positivity and you just radiate positivity. And I think so many people are cheering you on as they're
Oh,
listening to
thank
this.
you.
But I have to ask the question because I feel like people are going to want to know. But are you nervous about, kind of the next steps after this gap year and about, I know you obviously have the goal of the book, which I all the things, hopefully your prayers are sent your way, that everything happens the way you want it to. But are you nervous that maybe it doesn't go the way that you want it to?
I am nervous. I'm trying to be of two minds. One mind says, don't feed into fear. Don't make decisions based on fear because whatever you focus on will grow. And I don't want that to be my reality where I have a great year and then just have to go right back. But the realist in me knows that we need a certain amount of money to live the life that we live. And so there's a good chance that I will have to go back and find another sort of corporate job or something like that. And am I nervous? No, I'm not nervous because I am lowering the bar for myself. I am prepared because we have changed the way that we live. We have changed our lifestyle. We've changed the number of bills that we have to pay every month because we pay down debt that I can make much, much less. And so this is taking a bit of a reset in my ego that when and if I have to go back to work, that I will not be in a C-level position, that I will not be making six figures. And so I think because of that, because I am prepared to change my career trajectory in that way. You know, everyone always thinks you've just got to go up and to the right, more money, next promotion, more uh, um, responsibility. The fact that I'm willing to say that might not be it for me. It will very likely be less money and less prestige, if you will, in the title. I'm okay with that. And so I think that I have enough really marketable skills that I can find a job making less.
Mm-hmm. And you bring up a really good point that I don't think people might even think about if they're, kind of toying with the idea of doing a gap year, which is that it would be really humbling, to go from, like you
Mm-hmm.
said, you were working in the C-suite, six-figure, position. Obviously, clearly during the pandemic, you were busy working and doing all the things, even late at night. So, obviously had a fantastic career for a long time. And it sure has to be humbling to kind of really make
Mm-hmm.
such a switch. So it's like you're kind of trading the humility for the happiness, though. And I think the happiness definitely wins. You want that peace and you want that, kind of get that balance back. So I think it's worth it. But that's a really good point you bring up. Now, I also wanted to ask you, because you kind of mentioned this already, but how did you actually prepare for a gap year?
Yeah, so like I said, during COVID, we were able to just change the way we spent money. So we started by paying down our debts. Obviously, you have bills that you have to pay every month, you know, your utility bill and your phone bill and things like that. That's not going to change. But your debt, our car loans and our credit card debt, those were things that we could pay down really aggressively so that we didn't have those bills every single month. So we started by paying down our debts. Once we did that, we started saving, kind of ruthlessly saving. We had a tight budget and we stuck to it. And another big thing that has allowed us to do this is that we use the equity from our house to buy an investment property. It was kind of in the middle of nowhere in the mountains of Colorado, a real fixer upper. We put a lot of sweat equity into it, and now we use that as a short term rental and we get passive income from
I love that idea. Very
that.
cool. Very cool. Now, when you had this idea, and it sounds like your family is very tight, you have a great relationship with your husband. How did they react to you when you said, "Hey, I need to take some time off. I'm going to do this thing called a gap year that you don't usually hear about, with people a little bit later in life." So, how did they react when you told them about this?
My husband is the most supportive human on the planet. He is. I mean, I could tell you 10 different stories of us over the last 20 years where I've had kooky ideas and he said, "Yep, how can we make that work?" So he's a pretty incredible man and human and friend and partner to me. And he was enthusiastic right away. And we were a great team in figuring out how to make the midlife gap year happen for me. And our sons definitely wondered how it would impact them, but I we did it slowly over those 2 years, making these small changes in the way that we were living our lives, and everyone just adjusted.
Hmm. Now, how about your employer? So, when you finally said, "You know what, I'm out," after all this time, how'd they take that?
Yeah, when I gave my notice in December, I gave, a good long notice. My company tried to talk me out of it, which was nice. That felt good. But they understood really quickly that there was absolutely nothing that they could have said or offered that would have changed my mind. I'm sure that my bosses and my team, my the leadership team, I'm sure everyone. I don't think that they believed that I was going to take a break. I think that they were waiting for my LinkedIn update that I had joined another company and that I just wasn't sharing what my next step was. It really is truly unbelievable to many people that you would walk away from a successful career to find more meaning in your life, especially at my age. I think you see that as people are getting older, maybe in their 50s or 60s, but I think in their 40s, that's when you grind. And I honestly, I think that some, although no one has said this to me directly, I have gotten the feeling that some have viewed my decision as lazy or unprofessional or maybe even a little unhinged. But in reality, I have never worked harder or with more intention towards anything.
Hmm. No, I love that. And you bring up a good point with that, because a lot of times we don't have, obviously you had a plan in place, you and your husband, you've been working diligently towards this. This was not a rash decision.
Right.
But to actually make this happen, it's amazing. Now, like you said, you've pulled the plug on the career in January. So what have you actually already been able to do so far?
Well, actually, just a couple of days before my last day of work, my husband was in a really bad accident when he was on a dive trip in Mexico. He came home from the trip. We thought he was recuperating. I had my last day at work on the 24th of January. And then just a couple of days later, he had to go into the hospital where he was there for 5 days. And to my former employer's credit, they would have given me all the time I needed to be with my husband because that's the kind of company that they are. But I know me, and I would have been at his bedside, sneaking in emails while he was napping. I would have been attending meetings here and there because my priorities were all out of whack. And so being recently unemployed, it was a hard reset for me. I was able to give my attention fully to my husband during his time in the hospital and during those a couple few weeks of his recovery afterwards. So it was a weird start. It was definitely not how I thought that my start was going to go. Thankfully, he's doing really great now. He is, really on a good road to recovery. And in the last 6 or 7 weeks, I have found such a great and fun groove for my days and my new life. I am enjoying mornings now. Mornings were always terrible at my house. I was rushed. I was thinking about the meeting or the problem that I had to solve or the hard conversation that I would have to have later on that day. And now I just get up with my kids and we have breakfast and we talk about their days, and it's just neat and slow and calm and connecting. And I'm around when they get out of school in the afternoon. My weekends are so fun because I'm not dreading the week ahead or thinking about the week ahead or trying to jam in little emails or projects along the way. And so I'm just with my husband and sons in a way I have never been before. I am focusing on them completely. I'm enjoying them fully. It's so, so fun. And really exciting for me is that I've written about 20,000 words of my novel, and things are just flowing really, really beautifully. I'll admit that one of my biggest fears of taking this time off for myself to write is that I wouldn't be able to do it. I would just have block, or that I would make excuses, or that I would continue to not find the discipline to set aside the time to write, even though I had these empty days now. But my story is just flowing out of me, and it has been a true joy to bring this to life.
Well, first, I'm glad your husband is doing better. That's
Yes,
good
thank
news.
you. Yes.
And secondly, I think that's great. That your outlet, like it's coming out of you, like you said, like it has the space, it has the time, and now things are just kind of, the words are hitting the paper, which is awesome. That is
Yes.
really exciting. And I thought of something else as you were talking, just about how much you're enjoying your days and your conversations with the kids and the breakfast and just connecting with them. And, there is something called the Sunday scaries. I know I've
Mm,
seen it online before where, Sunday night or even Sunday afternoon, you start feeling some type of way about the upcoming work week and all the meetings and maybe work travel or just the stuff you have to do and how crazy your week looks. And you start to get that kind of pit in your stomach of, oh gosh, it's still the weekend and you're already feeling the anxiety of the upcoming work week. And, especially for those, because this episode will come out on a Monday and people will listen to it throughout the week. But, to hear your story again, I think the lesson here still is you got to find some kind of work-life balance, even if you're not
yes.
able to do the gap year. So I guess that kind of brings me to my next question, which is, if you have people listening right now who are just completely inspired and they're saying to themselves, you know what, I'm going to do this. I'm going to make this happen. What advice would you have for them if they want to do what you're doing?
Oh, yeah, that's a good question. Okay, a couple things. I would say figure out, what do you want your gap year to be about? For me, it's about bringing a long silence dream to life with writing a book. Maybe you have a similar dream, like something creative that needs room to be able to grow. Maybe you have no idea what you want the next 20 years of your life to look like with your career, but it's not what you're doing now, and you just need some space away from your job so that you can allow these things to bubble up about what you should be doing. Maybe you just need a dang break for a while because, again, it's just crazy that we're supposed to work for 45 years with a couple of just weeks off here and there. So anyways, decide what does it mean for you? What does a gap year mean? What are you going to be trying to get out of it? Because for me, it's not just, oh, I'm just going to take a year off from work, I'm going to just be lazy. That's not what it is for me. Maybe that is what it is for you. Maybe you need a year of lazy. I say, heck yeah, take it if that's what you need. And then obviously you need to get ready financially, however that looks like to you. And, I'll just say, I know that I am in a position of financial privilege that we can do this because my husband makes good money at his job. We're in a position that we've been investing and saving for many, many years. I do think that this is possible for many people, but you have to go into it knowing that it's going to take sacrifice and it's going to take planning. And lastly, I think getting your mind ready, for me, like I said, it's taken a reset of my ego to take this gap year. I got a lot of reinforcement of my value by working. I was good at what I did. I was able to see the impact of my work every day. And I was nervous about how I would feel in my new life where I wasn't contributing to something in such a tangible way. I was nervous about that. And I am happy to report that I feel more fulfilled than ever. But I did a lot of mental work to prepare myself for that.
Hmm. And that kind of surprises me because I can relate to that. Your work does validate you. I mean, that becomes like
Hmm.
our identity after a while. When you
Hmm.
meet somebody and it's not just, hi, I'm Kym, but it's like, hi, Kym, what do
Oh,
you do for a living?
the
It's like
first
that's
question.
yes, right? So it's because it's who you are, it's how you relate,
Hmm.
and it's what you wind up talking about
That's
with
right.
a lot of people. So like you said, it just becomes so much a part of you. But I'm glad that you have found that you're much more fulfilled now. And, like you said, you had to do a lot of work to get there, but
Yep.
that's awesome. That is awesome. So I'm sure that the listeners right now are just, they're probably a little bit surprised and shocked and inspired and excited to go home and tell their partners that this is something that they want to do too.
Oh, I
Um,
hope so.
Me too. But I would like to know because people are going to want to follow you along this journey. And you mentioned that you have TikTok. So can you tell everybody, how can we follow you on your journey?
Yes, I am sort of video journaling now my midlife gap year on TikTok and on Instagram. My handle is Kimmers Full of Sunshine on both social channels. I'm also working on getting a website up. It'll just be my name, KymWootton.com. My name is spelled all kinds of weird, so you'll need to check the show notes to get it right. And I'm going to put together a little list if you want to be notified when my book is published, because I know the universe is bringing that to me. Please come and sign up for notifications. But I would love if you'd follow along on a more daily basis on TikTok and Instagram.
Absolutely. And I will. I will include in the show notes for those listening. And if you're driving, don't worry. I will include all of Kym's socials down below so
Thank
that you
you.
can keep up with her. Absolutely. And I definitely want a copy of this book when it comes out. So
You got it.
now, obviously, this is where things are at now. We're in April. But again, people are going to be curious how this year actually went. So will you come back to the podcast and actually tell
Oh,
us what happened?
heck yes, Lexi. I would be so excited to do that.
Awesome. Awesome. We will be so glad to have you back. So, Kym, it has been an absolute pleasure talking with you today and getting to know you. And I'm sure the listeners feel absolutely inspired. And if nothing else, will hopefully find a little bit more work-life balance in their own lives. So, thank you so much for coming on to the Piece of Me podcast and sharing your story with us today.
Thank you. This has been so fun to talk to you today. And thank you for letting me tell my story.
Absolutely. I've created this space to help you live your best life. If you want to help support the podcast in return, I'd be forever grateful of your support. Please give this show a rating or share an episode with a friend. You can also join me on Instagram at the Piece of Me Podcast. Let's stay connected.